All right, so there's this video that's been making the rounds online, and it's making a pretty huge claim. It's saying that the global backlash against Israel has gotten so intense that its citizens are facing travel bans and even mass deportations. Today, we're going to unpack the argument presented in that video to see exactly how it builds its case. So the video kicks off with this really powerful statement. I mean, this is the bedrock of its entire argument right here. It's claiming that something fundamental has shifted and that this change is having real, tangible consequences for Israeli travelers all across the globe. So how does the source actually build this case? Well, here's the roadmap. It starts with public opinion data, then it tries to connect that to specific incidents happening around the world. From there, it dives into a potential reason for this backlash before laying out its core thesis and finally, the alleged consequences. First up, the source grounds its entire argument in what it calls a massive change in how the world, and especially Americans, views the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Okay, so this is the key piece of data the source uses to anchor its whole narrative. It points to this one poll of American voters. According to the video's reading of it, sympathies that were, way in favor of Israelis just a few months back have completely flipped. Now they're leaning towards the Palestinians. And the source makes a big deal about this, calling it a shift that's never been seen before. The video then tries to broaden this out. It connects that polling data to a bigger picture of Israel's international standing. It points to the Global Nation Brands Index, which is this big annual survey on how countries are perceived, and highlights that Israel ranked dead last, presenting this as more proof for its claim of global hatred. So the video claims public opinion has shifted, but how does that actually play out in the real world? Well, it then presents a whole series of incidents that it frames as evidence of a coordinated global pattern. And the source really casts a wide net here. It pulls examples from Europe to South America to make its point. It talks about calls for bans or deportations in places like Romania and Chile, and then gets into specific policies and events in countries as different as the Maldives, Ghana, and even Russia. Here, the source zooms in on a piece of anecdotal evidence that really blew up online. This clip of a confrontation in Thailand went viral, and the video claims that this single moment sparked a much wider backlash from local business owners who started accusing some Israeli tourists of illegal activity. The source also points to more extreme examples, like this scene from an airport in Dagestan, Russia. The video frames this event not as just some random act of violence, but as a form of what it calls vigilante justice, something it claims happens when people feel like their governments aren't stepping up. Okay, so then the source pivots a little bit. It starts to argue that these incidents aren't just happening out of the blue. It claims they're a direct reaction to a very specific and long-standing negative reputation that it says is associated with Israeli tourists. Now, this is a crucial part of its argument. To make this claim stick, the source tries to show that this isn't just an outside criticism. It actually cites Jewish publications to argue that this negative reputation is a known issue, something that's been acknowledged from within. Then it gets really specific about the accusations. The source claims that in places like Thailand and Sri Lanka, alleged behaviors have led locals to feel like their towns are being, and this is the source's phrase, illegally occupied. And now we get to the absolute heart of the video's thesis. This is where it connects everything: the alleged behavior of individuals, national policy, and its justification for this so-called global backlash. So the source brings up a pretty common idea, right? You shouldn't blame an entire population for what its government does. But then it makes this hugely controversial exception. It argues that in this one specific case, that line is totally blurred by what it claims is overwhelming public support for government policy. And this is the number the video uses to justify that exception. It makes the extremely serious allegation that 8 out of 10 Israelis support genocide and ethnic cleansing. It uses this claim to argue that you can't separate the people from the actions of the state. To try and double down on its claim about public sentiment, the video then makes another pivot. It turns the lens inward and presents evidence of what it alleges are systemic racist policies by the Israeli state, not against Palestinians, but against its own Jewish citizens. And this is where the source makes one of its most inflammatory claims. It alleges that the Israeli government sees Black Jews as a threat to what the source calls the nation's white European DNA, and it uses that assertion to frame the policies it's about to discuss. To give this claim some historical context, the video points to the findings of a journalistic investigation from 2012.
It alleges that this investigation uncovered a state-sanctioned program where Ethiopian Jewish women were essentially coerced into getting contraceptive injections as a condition for being allowed to immigrate to Israel.
Finally, the source brings the whole narrative full circle. It details what it claims are the direct consequences of this global backlash for Israelis themselves. The source presents this next point as a kind of official admission that the threat is real. It reports that the Israeli government itself is now allegedly telling soldiers to limit their travel abroad because of the risk of being arrested or questioned over war crimes allegations. And the response to all this? According to the source, Israel plans to put aside nearly $1 billion for what the video calls propaganda in 2026. It's framed as this massive spending increase designed specifically to fight back against this negative global narrative. And that's where it ends. The video leaves its audience with this one last really provocative question. It basically wraps up the source's entire argument, asking you to think about that complicated and often messy relationship between a state, its policies, and the citizens who put it in power.